Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Portsmouth School Board meeting for September 14th, 2010. If I could ask the superintendent to please take the roll call.
Ann Mayer.
Here.
Carol Chelman.
Here.
Rebecca Remison.
Here.
Dexter Legg.
Here.
Kent LePage.
Here.
Ann Walker.
Here.
Mitch Schulman.
Here.
Tom Martin.
Here.
Leslie Stevens.
Here.
Linda Brulette.
Here.
Savannah Federo.
Here.
Clay Haywood.
Okay. If I could ask you to join me in a moment of silent reflection, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes from August 24th, 2010.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Public commentary. So we have one person who's signed up. If you would come forward, state your name and where you live, and
Dr. Schulman, members of the board, Joe Ornstein, teacher at Portsmouth High School, and I live on Foch Avenue in Portsmouth. On the opening day staff meeting for teachers and Portsmouth school staff, we had what I would say is the pleasure of having school board representatives come to address us at the high school in the auditorium. I say the pleasure, and I'm not being facetious when I do this. I don't know how many schools in New Hampshire, how many school systems have such a good relationship with board and staff that school board members actually take time out of their day to come and speak to the teachers. And I guess I would say I'm repaying the favor. Dr. Schulman was brief and positive in his remarks. I will try to repay that favor as well. I made a mistake, though, a few seconds ago when I talked about this happening on the opening day of school. Actually, this year, for the first time, this was our second day of school. We had already come in for one day for meetings, arranging classrooms, putting things together in our respective departments or in our respective elementary schools, middle school. And while Dr. Schulman was making his remarks, I was looking around the auditorium, and I realized, this is something I wish more taxpayers knew about, that this really wasn't the second day for most of the people I work with, that many of the teachers in the system had been in their schools for days getting ready. And I could say honestly, and particularly at the elementary level, some of our staff members had been in the school literally for weeks. But I did have to wonder, again looking around the auditorium, if perhaps we were headed in slightly the wrong direction. The teachers that I work with were planning to go upstairs to their classroom again and put the last touches on getting ready to use their curricula to accomplish the mission statement with our students. On the other hand, as you're well aware, this year all staff members are under increasing pressure to cause our kids to perform well on standardized tests. These goals are not necessarily contradictory, but they are not necessarily something that could be accomplished in one stroke. I would suggest that if we are going to add days to the school year, this year we had 2 before the kids arrived, and if we are going to add days to the school year at the end, last year we had 2 after after the kids left, that maybe we should be adding days to the school year in which we can work with our students. Because if we are going to accomplish our curricula, and if we are going to accomplish preparing kids for standardized tests, very simply, we do need to work with the students. Thank you.
thank you very much. Anybody else who didn't sign up that would like the opportunity to speak? Very good. Okay, we'll move on. We have a couple of special presentations this evening, but actually mostly we'd like to introduce, the board had a chance to meet, but we'd like to introduce to the community some of the new teachers who are coming into Portsmouth this year. So I'll hand it off to the superintendent.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we have 5 new hires. We're very pleased. We have some wonderful staff who've joined us this year. The principals are here from the schools to introduce them, so I guess I'll look to leadership first, and Mr. Stokely, if you might introduce your new staff members.
Chair Shulman, members of the board, and school department staff. I have the distinct honor to introduce 3 new faculty members for the Portsmouth Middle School this year. First, we have Amanda Hodgson Morales. Amanda? Amanda is our new teacher in Family and Consumer Science. She has her bachelor's degree in Family Studies from the University of New Hampshire with a concentration in education and adolescence. Before coming to us, she was a paraprofessional at Cole Brown Academy for 3 years, so welcome, Amanda. Our next new faculty member is Rebecca Tuttle. Rebecca is the teacher in our special education kids program. She has her bachelor's degree in psychology from Plymouth State University and her master's degree in education from the University of New Hampshire. Rebecca was also a paraprofessional at the middle school for a number of years before moving into our teacher ranks. So welcome, Rebecca. And our final candidate is our new teacher in 6th grade teaching math and science, Mrs. Lisa Sweet. Lisa has her bachelor's degree in engineering from Duke University and her master's degree in education from Harvard. And we are very happy to welcome Lisa to our faculty at the middle school. And I would also like to just take a moment to thank the board for your outstanding support of public education in the city of Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Principal Shea?
Good evening, everyone, members of the board. I am extremely pleased tonight to introduce Ms. Jacqueline Nutter as our new speech and language pathologist at New Franklin School. Jacqueline received her bachelor's degree in speech and elementary education from the UMaine Farmington and her master's degree in speech pathology from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. She comes to us after 7 years working, well, some years in private practice and 7 years working at Acton Elementary School in Acton, Maine. And in her relatively short time at New Franklin, she's already proved to be an indispensable asset, and we're ecstatic to have her on staff. So welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you. Principal Grossman?
Good evening. It is my pleasure to actually reintroduce Heidi White, who is actually returning to Little Harbor School. Heidi has a bachelor's degree from Wheelock College and a master's in literacy from Lesley University. And Heidi was a reading recovery teacher and first grade teacher in Bath, Maine, before teaching first grade at Little Harbor for 3 years. And there were a lot of people who were thrilled at Little Harbor to see the opportunity to have her back in the building for second grade. And so it's been a great start to the year. We're happy to have her back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So welcome. I think, is there some ceremony that takes place? I think there's a gauntlet that the new candidates actually get to come by and shake hands with all the...
Right, so we would ask you to line up here, and actually one by one we want to shake your hand and welcome you officially into the City of Portsmouth School Department.
The Purell, get the Purell.
I'm not listening. I'm not shaking.
Welcome and congratulations. Good luck. Uh-oh. Yeah, because that's going to happen again.
Yeah, like getting home.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good luck to you.
Hi, welcome.
Hi again.
Congratulations again.
Yeah.
Hi again. Welcome. Coming back.
Hello again. Welcome.
I will.
I've seen your husband a few times.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Do you remember my daughter, Carly? Yes. How are you? I'm good. She's a freshman. She's a freshman. Yeah. She was there this summer too. Yeah.
Look back.
Yeah. I'm not shaking your hand. Thank you.
Is it going okay?
Great.
Good.
Thank you all very much for coming. I would like to wish you a wonderful coming school year, productive, fun, exciting, and maybe the first of many years in the district. Welcome. You can go home now.
Work on your lesson plans.
You can go home now.
Lisa, you have to.
Maybe he was hired when I was in senior high school.
So before we move on, even though it's not listed, I would like to, and we'll do a more formal introduction when the person's actually here, but we have a new school board member that's been sworn in to serve on the school board, Henry Clay Hayward, who's been on the school board before. I just want people out there in the community to know that we've replaced the school board member who left, and we'll talk more about Clay when he's here at the next meeting. But just briefly, I know that he served on the board himself for 4 years. And then he came back when school board member Ray Bowles retired. Clay was invited back to fill that position. And now that Lisa Sweet has retired from the board, we had a meeting with the city attorney. And much of the progression of school board seats as one person leaves is prescribed in the charter. And they go back to the election from which the person who retired ran, and Clay was on that list, and so he's the next school board member, and he's been signed in. So hopefully at the next meeting we'll have a more official introduction, and we can introduce him to everybody then. So I just wanted to get that clear. Okay, superintendent's report.
Yes, in your materials you have a copy of this fall's course offerings from the Portsmouth Community Education. The programming that will take place at the middle school, minutes from the policy subcommittee, and notice from the state of New Hampshire that our school lunch program will go through a review sometime later this year. It typically happens once every 5 years, and 5 years ago it was in February, and so we're anticipating that's likely when it will take place. There is a letter that was sent to the City Council where the school board was also CC'd that contained a suggestion for parking at the middle school, and I shared that letter with you this evening. You have notice from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges that they've scheduled the visit to Portsmouth High School. It will actually take place September 30th to October 3rd in 2012.
Right.
So it's a little bit later than we thought. That's a good thing in some respects. It gives us a little more time to go through the self-study process. I also shared in your packet a policy, and this was in response to a concern raised at the last meeting, and in particular about the new signage that's the 2 plaques that are associated with the improvements by the class of 2010 last year. And you know, perhaps this is a policy that it was recently adopted a year ago, but it talks a little bit about advertising in the schools, and at the bottom of the page it talks a little bit about, recognition. And so there can be some, obviously, interpretation around what is recognition versus what is advertising. Clearly, those people, their bronze plaques, I think Kent referred to them as 12 by 15, but I wanted to respond and share with you that that's the lay of the land there.
Mr. Chairman? And I'd like to just follow up on that. I do believe the board needs to quickly put this on as an agenda item, because we continuously have this question. There's a city ordinance, and then there's the school board policy that we have on this. And I'm a big believer in the freedom of speech, and once we allow certain advertising, which we need to interpret what that is. And I think we have kind of stepped over the line here. There is actually a protocol along with this procedure that is to be followed along with. And again, I would hate to see us get into the quandary of some adult-specific type product being advertised, whether it be liquor, cigarettes, or something along those lines. Once we step over this line, I think it's very hard to come back. It is one that I believe we can control, and it is under the board's policy to control this. And again, I appreciate what every one of these individuals donate and so forth. So it's not against the individuals. It's making sure we have a compliance and a true procedure to follow this. So I request that we have this in the next 2 months before other fundraisers and so forth come forth.
Okay. Okay.
The item 8 in the superintendent's report is just a follow-up. You may recall last June, we had a request from SAU 31 in Newmarket, basically wondering whether or not the Portsmouth School Board would entertain a discussion about helping them with their secondary school issues, be it short-term, long-term. I did get a phone call from Superintendent Jim Hayes, he's the new superintendent there, asking if the board might sit down with a couple of his board members, with a couple board members from Portsmouth to have a conversation, be it long-term or short-term. In fact, we tentatively scheduled a meeting date 2 weeks from tonight, just prior to our workshop session at 5 o'clock. So I would, in the chair, if we could have a couple of board members who might be willing to sit down and listen and hear what they have to say. And
So just, is there anybody who's interested in participating?
I'd ask for prior on that.
I would do it.
Kent and Ann,
okay, great.
and I guess, and myself. If I could.
Mitch, fine, great, thank
Okay,
you.
good.
And lastly, I know Assistant Superintendent Zadovic wants to give you an update on the plans around our homestay visit with the folks from Nichidan, Japan.
Sure. As you may recall, we have 20 students coming to visit us just now in a couple of weeks, beginning of October, to stay with students at our high school. They'll be staying for 4 days. And this is also on the heels of the trip that our students, the Madrigal Singers, took over to Japan to perform in their statewide festival of high schools. And so based on the trip that the students had taken and looking at setting up the homestay families here, we want to also give them the same kind of warm welcome that our students received when we went over there. And in addition to the students and the teachers from the Nichinan Gakuin High School, there'll also be city officials and of people associated with the sister city relationship and the Portsmouth Peace Treaty celebrations. So we'd like to certainly establish this as a big welcoming event, and so at your place you have an invitation. I'd like to especially thank Amy Noble for working on some of the details with this, as well as creating this invitation, and to make a special request to you for your presence on Sunday, October 3rd at the Wentworth by the Sea, where we will host the students coming in. We will set them up with their host families, and we'll also have a celebration of the sister city relationship. So hope that you can make it.
You have all the host families set up? And
Most of them are set up now, and we're still following up some leads. Jeff met with Jeff Collins and Wendell Purrington, and at the high school they're organizing a number of events associated with the host family stays and the host families that'll be there. A number of the students who went to Japan are very interested in hosting a student now back here.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And then just the correspondence.
Yes, and that was, I think you had addressed that matter in terms of...
So we had received a letter from the city clerk initially about the opening in the school board, and they sent a letter to Mr. Hayward, and he responded and said he was interested. He went in, I think it was on September 9th, and took the oath. So, okay. Financials.
In your packets, you have the August financial report, although it isn't totally fleshed out because we're still working on adjusting the plan for the year, and weren't able to get it done in time to make the deadline to send out in the packets. But we'll have the report back up to its normal format for the September report for you.
Anybody have any questions on what's in front of you? No, Leslie. Yes.
On the substitute line, does that mean that we had substitutes over the summer, or is that just in the first week of school, or what is that?
Sometimes we would have some in the first week of school as well if we had people out on leave. And there were a couple of leaves that took place at the very beginning of the year that we didn't find out about till the end, so, yes.
Thank you.
Just on a different note than what's in front of us, but it is financially related, do you have any information on, or have you heard anything about the federal money coming into the state and allocated down to the school districts, or is the state going to?
Well, we had
$40.9 million.
Zero.
We did have a presentation at last Friday's New Hampshire's School Business Administrators meeting that I attended. Sally Fellows and Mr. Gonzalez came in to discuss that and a lot about the auditing of the money that we already got, because as you will recall, the first batch of money, part of the money was set aside by the governor and put into the funding formula. Mm-hmm. So as a result, that's counted as federal money for us, even though it was done on a state level. So we have a single audit anyway, so that doesn't cause a problem for us. But there are a number of small districts in the state that pushes them over the limit. So now they have to have a single audit, and so that was an issue. But we did ask many questions as we could get answers to about the new money. I guess I can start with the end in that I don't believe Portsmouth is going to see any. The governor has two choices for distribution, and it's just the distribution methodology only, as we understand it. One of them is the Title I formula, and then the other one would be the standard state funding formula. And this year, in the standard state funding formula, Portsmouth does not receive any state aid, so we would not get any. The belief is right now that the governor is tending towards going to the state funding formula, although I haven't seen that in writing yet, but we've heard it from a couple of different sources, including the Department of Ed. So it appears that Portsmouth will not benefit from that money at this stage of the game. Now, we were told that there is a possibility that something might occur, but, we've been told that before. So I wouldn't get my hopes up at all. I would say that the superintendent's quote of zilch, nada, nothing is probably still accurate.
Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
No, I mean, is it worthwhile understanding how the state, if you could keep it simple for me so I can understand it, how they determine their state formula and how many cities or districts other than Portsmouth aren't getting funding?
The state funding formula is not a simple thing to explain.
Oh,
Unfortunately,
I withdraw the question.
Well, I wished it were. We did receive some money in the last round because we were in a transition formula, but that was merely a glitch. There was some hold harmless provisions, which we just caught the tail of. But it's a long explanation, I think. I don't know, unless Mr. McDonough wants to take a whack at it.
No, but Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There may be even some concern whether the money's distributed down to districts. Is that fair to say?
Because
it may be kept for adequacy.
There is some concern, but
on the state side.
Yeah, but according to the governor's office, if he uses it for adequacy, it is going down to the schools.
Through that funding formula.
But it's not going to be in addition. It'll be, or at least it won't be much of an addition. I would have preferred the Title I formula, in which case, my calculations, we would have benefited from $500,000 worth of funding from that.
But just so I understand, the state gets to determine if it funds it through Title I, which is how we got our monies in the first stimulus package.
Correct.
Such as they were.
Right.
And this time they're not going in that direction.
They are not.
And it's the governor's choice.
And
the governor's choice. Those are the two choices given to the governor by the Federal Department of Education.
Kent? Yeah.
Just to follow up, though, I think it's a simple request to go back to the state, because as you said, whether they use it for adequacy testing down from the state's level to how they wish to perform, is that, under many guidances and eyes at the state level, what should be asked for is direct impact to communities. And I believe I've actually seen a statement that it's direct impact to whether it be Nashua, because I know I actually have seen receiving money. I believe I saw Amherst was receiving money. I saw that Allenstown was, and again, so I know there's got to be a document that says these communities did get, X dollars, which I would consider direct impact towards it. And if it's needed towards a poorer community or a community of need or something, that's understandable. But it's not an even distribution done by whether it be Title I or whether it be done by student-based needs. Again, I know there has to be some document, again, when it's direct impact towards it. I maybe Steve's sort of looking at, there is something out there. Is that not correct, that that money has had some visibility?
Well, it has not been distributed to districts at all, but I guess the only comment I'd make is the funding formula from the state itself isn't based on need per se, and I think that's been a long-standing issue, is whether targeted aid is something that's allowable under the state funding formulas. So I think that's kind of the bind that we would be in, which is that we're kind of at a place in a funding formula that isn't necessarily based on.
But the minute the state starts to allocate money towards communities, then it has legs and must have some type of formula or reasoning behind it. I mean, it's not the state's money; it's the feds giving them money towards what they have put in there for. And again, I believe when all is said and done, and I know it's going to happen relatively fast in the world of government. That the money is going to have some distributions to communities under, I believe, whether it was grants or something that people, or some type of wording out there, maybe grants isn't the right one. Again, if there's direct money going to communities, I believe we have a right to know where that money went.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that the state would be accountable to the federal government to report back
Absolutely.
on how it spent this money, and I guess I agree with Kent, is what we're asking is that when all is said and done, I think I would like to see a copy of that report so that we understand how the money that came into the state from the federal government has been spent.
Right.
Even if we don't get a dime.
Maybe I can clarify it a little bit.
No.
Okay.
And the day the announcement was made, there were a lot of people that were on a conference call with the Secretary of Education, and he said, here's how it's going to go. The governor of each state will fill out a very simple application with complicated assurances. That's my terminology. I think they're kind of complicated. But in any case, all they had, that the assurances are on there and he signs it. They have a choice. They gave a list of what the preliminary allocations were by state, and they said, here's the choice. The governor can distribute it. It's his choice by either a title, using the existing Title I formula, or an existing state funding formula.
Yeah.
And our state funding formula has two pieces to it. One is an adequacy grant, which is where you get the grant terminology, and the other one is the state education tax, which is collected locally based on part of the formula. So what they're talking about is using it, if they use it to balance the budget or to beef up the adequacy portion of the state funding formula, it will go out according to the standard formula that's been in existence all along, as it's modified every year. And they will publish, there will be a report available that'll show everyone that got it. And if someone was going to get regular adequacy grant money this year, which we're not, they would be entitled to some of that money based on that formula.
But it will be isolated in that report from what's federal money versus what is state money collected in some way, or will it just be buried?
It will have to be because
they need to account it for
because the
feds.
audit will have to do it, and that's part of what our meeting was about, was handling the auditing part of it.
I'd just like to see that report when it's made available.
Yeah.
I think it's appropriate to the
As soon as
board.
I get it, I'll make it I'll hand it out to the board, but it won't come out for a while because they still haven't sent the money out at all. As of Friday, nobody had received any money yet.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Steve. Next on the budget, on the agenda, is old business. So you were sent in your packet the sheet of paper that has the school board goals for 2010, 2011. We've had this a couple of times, I think, already. And I think what the administration is looking for is maybe a discussion around if people have any questions, concerns, some help from your perspective as what you think might be missing from this, or if everybody is comfortable with it and you feel like it covers all the major issues that we're dealing with as a district and it gives enough guidance to the administration, we can put it up at the next school board meeting for, to sort of pass it or condone it. Yes.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, what I was thinking is that I'd make a motion to pass it tonight for the first time, so then if there are additions to go back, so that, again, if we have a vote to accept it, then those areas that we wish to go back and examine, then we don't have to do all of it. We only have to do those that people may have a concern with. So again, I will go that if we take a motion to accept the school board goals of 2010, 2011 tonight and be reviewed, any portion which is to be pulled.
I'll second.
That's a good idea. Okay, so with that on the table, anybody have any comments or discussion about what you see in front of you? Yes, Tom.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I thought the goals are really well laid out. They're very clear, and I think it really gives us an opportunity as a board to really track, monitor, and see the physical progress as we go throughout the year. So I think we all should be pretty happy with what Ed and his administration has put together.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also just probably wouldn't be adding much, but I would just say that, I think what I find helpful is that it really focuses on all of the key points that we've been talking about over this last year that the district has been working towards, which is professional learning communities and continuing that initiative, the awareness and the need for effective interventions in all the schools as a way to make sure that we catch kids before they begin to fall through the cracks. We have an effort to look at K-12, but even particularly K-5 technology over the course of this year. And I think also some of the other things that are starting to be put into place, I think, would be implementing, as it says here, a good, clear system of supervision and evaluation, which I think Portsmouth really needs. So I'm really excited about those. So that's just all I had to add. Ann?
I'd just like to comment on the fourth one, ways to ensure district resources are aligned with the strategies to achieve the mission. I appreciate the fact that we need to be looking into the staff utilization, trying to schedule times, extending times for students that need expanded learning time. So I will be anxious to see how that's going to work out.
Kent?
The only comment I have in regards to it is that we at the board are well aware that we begin before the kindergarten age. And we always put it as K-12, whether it's examining the technology under item 1, bullet 3, or again under item 2, bullet 4, where we say K-5.
Yeah.
And we are a pre-K by demand and by ordinance that I believe that's one area we need to make sure we take credit for it, and then the public also is more aware that
that's good. Good
Absolutely.
point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Pre-K through 18.
No, 21 in the state.
Oh, that's what 21.
See, and that's the other side is that we don't stop there. Thank you to Concord.
That's okay. Yes. Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
No, not about the goals, but I guess on the flip side, one of the things I did want to share with the board, and because our next meeting will be in a workshop setting, it'll be at the high school. I did have some conversation with Mitch and Ann about the best way to proceed, and so we're going to, each of the schools will invite their PAC group, their PTA, their parent group to come, and we're thinking about a 30-minute before the meeting opportunity to come in and meet the board and have a conversation with the board, and we'll see how that goes. So, we're at Portsmouth High School on the 28th. Jeff will ask his PAC group to come. You'll have that opportunity, and so we'll do that with each of the visits to the schools. It'll be televised, it'll be taped, of course, and then the principals will take some opportunity to showcase or take you to an area and invite some staff in, et cetera, to talk a little bit about what's going well in the school, something they want the board to see and learn about, ideally with a technology theme. But that may or may not work in all instances, but we're going to really work hard to make that happen in terms of, that agenda. And, the next agenda, so when you look at this little matrix here, we're trying to map out when presentations will be. You'll have the good fortune to see Steve and I at the first October meeting laying out those goals for folks at home in terms of the PLC work and where we are with interventions, et cetera. But we're trying to mark that through and see, you'll get a feedback on how our K-5 or PK-5 technology integration is going in November. So we're trying to map these things out and get more clear as terms of a work plan for the board. That's why getting the goals firmed up is helpful.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? So just so that people in the community are clear, so I guess this half hour at each building, as we're going to be having these meetings throughout the year in the schools, so I would encourage people in the community to come out to the school board meeting. And we'll call it a meet and greet. We'll talk with you, answer questions, maybe even ask your opinions about how we might move forward on some issues that we're facing. So I just want people to realize that we're trying to make the best of being out in the schools. The board as a whole thinks that it's important that we meet in the schools, at least each school building once every year, and so we're trying to sort of build upon the fact that we're going to be there. So I would invite people to come. Okay.
We have a motion.
You have a motion.
Oh, we do?
Roll call.
Oh, gosh. Thank you for keeping me. Okay, so any other further discussion on the motion on the table? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Can we take a minute, because I see that
Yes.
school board member Clay Hayward, the late Clay Hayward, no.
Who's late?
A longtime friend, and that we are in a formal meeting, that he is a board member, and we've recognized tonight that he'd pull up next to the student
Okay.
and join us. if that's appropriate.
Absolutely. I was going to do that. I just wanted to finish the piece we were working on. So, welcome.
Absolutely.
You're on the board. Join us.
We put you in the roll call.
Yes, we did.
Now we can mark you present.
Half present.
Half present.
Welcome, Clay.
Thank you.
So just moving along then to committee reports. So the first one up is technology.
The Technology Committee has been pretty active the past month and a half, even though we've been winding through summer. A lot of what we've been focused on has been to gear down towards taking a look at how we deliver technology. So we've had a number of things that we've taken a look at that has also included some of the teacher and student assessments to understand the level of technology that is currently being used, the comfort level, the types of things that are being used, things that people want to be using. But one of the things that we've really honed in on has been our technology platform, knowing full well that we have a distributed architecture and the fact that technology is not necessarily ubiquitous here in this campus. That we have a lot of things that are starting to happen from a mobile environment with sort of a BYOT, bring your own technology, cell phones coming in at different levels of the school system, understanding that one of the things that we're trying to be able to do here on a committee is understanding how can we further our technology experience as well as our platform to address a lot of the growing things and opportunities that are going to be available. So, in a budgetary cycle that we've had where we thought we were going to be cutting our technology budget, but we were fortunate enough to actually have an enhancement to it, so to buy some equipment. We are now taking a look at how we can actually deliver a different type of a technology solution. So we are starting to talk to some different companies. We've had a couple of different demos, and we're going to be putting together an analysis that eventually we'll be able to talk more broadly with the rest of the school board to really take a look at not only the quality and the scope of the technology that we'll be able to deliver, but also really the goal is to understand how do we take the expense that we have today, treat it much more like an asset, and how we can actually reuse it, redistribute it, so that we can actually take what we have and maybe get something more for it. I will share one thing here as I close here. One of the things that we did want to do was to create a little bit of a technology vision. So we had penned a little bit of a vision. It's something that is not official, but I thought I'd just quickly give you some scope of what we are taking a look at from a technology standpoint. So this is a bit of our vision statement. Our vision is to provide the educational community with the confidence and skills to leverage technology to broaden and enhance learning for all students. We believe that students will use technology to enhance the learning process, develop critical thinking skills, problem solve, communicate ideas, and work collaboratively with others to support individual and group learning. Teachers and other staff will use technology to facilitate learning and creativity with students and colleagues. It will enable better decision making with data-driven information, increased productivity, and planning. A commitment to continuing improvement through the professional development of teachers and staff in order to effectively impact teaching and the learning process. So that's a very broad statement, but it's something that from a foundational standpoint is going to help drive a lot of the work that we do. So upcoming, we're going to continue to do some evaluative work on some financial analysis, as well as some of the other platforms that we're trying to take a look at. And to give you a little bit of what we're looking at is, instead of looking at a distributed architecture, we're evaluating the opportunity to look at a cloud model, even though it might be an intranet, something that might be served up here within the school, or potentially it could be something that could be served up out of the school, but trying to understand how we can take technology and push it farther into the reaches of the school, as well as possibly extending it outside of the school. So when we think about the educational environment and using technology to expand it, that kids, teachers, administration might be able to have access to that same environment and tools, not just within this classroom, but outside the classroom, at home, within the library, etc. So more to come.
Yes, Carol.
I'm just wondering if we have any data in the district, this has come up before, about how many families do not have computers in their homes. And I don't know if you're giving any thought to that in what you're doing, because my understanding is maybe something like 25% of our families don't have computers. And I just don't know if you've got that actual solid data, and if you've thought at all about what, how do we, it's great to have all this technology in school, but if you go home and you don't have technology at home, what good is it? And you talk about kids bringing phones into school, I suppose every kid has a phone. I guess that's maybe official, but I don't know. I just wonder what data, and I'm also wondering from the superintendent as well, what kind of data do we have about how many families are without computer access at home, and what can we as a board do to try to reduce that number of families?
I don't have hard and fast data, Carol, but we have some guesstimates. But if you want that data, we can get that very easily, because the way schools distribute email, et cetera, we know who has to have material sent home directly versus who can get it sent via email. So I'll find that data for you if that's what you'd like.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Linda, and then.
So I'm going to give you my little technology story. Has nothing to do with the vision. It has to do with the fact that I'm a teacher and I have technology in my classroom. So the story goes like this. I have a really great laptop. Love the laptop. Have to have the laptop. Have a Promethean board. Last year got the Promethean board. It was lovely. Didn't sync with a laptop, which creates all kinds of havoc. And nobody could kind of fix it because I got the updated model. Great, gets it fixed, fabulous, but now I don't have any training. Small problem. All right, so we get some training. So now I spend the entire week this summer making all this great stuff to start school with. That's pretty cool. I was pretty proud of myself. Although my kids keep asking me, Mom, why are they giving you this stuff? You're too old to get it. But I assured them that I knew what I was doing. So then I decided I'd get an iTouch in the spring. Got an iTouch. It was equally cool. Although I decided my fingers must be fat because the spaces aren't big enough. So I decided I'd get an iPad this summer. So I spent another 2 nights in Exeter getting trained on my iPad. But the interesting thing about the iPad, I took the same computer laptop that I love from the district and took it up there, and I had followed the directions because I'm a real rule follower. Said, update your iTunes. Did that. Get up there, get the iPad, plug it in. I can't run the iPad off of my Mac because my software isn't updated. Now, there were, 10 Portsmouth teachers up there. 7 of us couldn't run the iPad off of our Mac because we didn't have the right software. Small problem. The other 3 people who could run it were fortunate enough to have had their computers crash, so they had to get things updated. Well, unbeknownst to me, I never wanted to be anybody who had something crash. But the second day of school, I was lucky enough to have it crash. So it wiped out my whole everything. And the stuff that I spent the week on the Promethean board training. I was not a happy camper. It got fixed, supposedly. Now, I say supposedly because it was returned to me, and it crashed again the day after Labor Day. Not happy again. And the software wasn't put back on. So, what you're doing is really cool and wonderful, but there's a ton of software out in the building, and there's a ton of stuff in the building that people really want to use, but somehow something's not connecting. So we have software. We want to use it. People are really zipped up and happy to be using it, and they're really enthusiastic. But I'm going to tell you, I'm not happy when stuff crashes and it doesn't sync. I watched Barack Obama today. I'm not going to say what I'm thinking, but it was very blurry on my new Promethean board because something is out of kilter. We could hear him, so that was good enough. But it was I had to explain to the kids why it was looking a little sketchy. So I'm not sure that we should spend lots more money getting more stuff until we fix the stuff that we have or figure out the best use of the stuff that we have.
Sure. Technology is definitely not perfect, and I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is not necessarily, we need a new car. And
right.
So a lot of what we're talking about is really how do we use what we have to maybe create something that's going to be easier, maybe more stable,
right.
That people are going to be more inclined to use because it is easier and more stable. So, absolutely, I hear exactly what you're saying. Technology tends to be a double-edged sword, and anything that we're talking about is going to be taken from a baby step standpoint. And I think before we even entertain doing some of the stuff as a committee, we talked about bringing in teachers. To understand a little bit what the current pain points are, and I think I've got a page full already from what you said.
When I have a couple of names of people who in our building would love to be on any committee to talk about what you ought to do. Okay, and I'm happy to give you those names. Because I think that without teachers, I think it's one thing to be a committee, but we're the ones that need to that use the stuff and with the kids all the time. And so I think that you need to get us involved so that we can tell you what's really going on.
Hey, the final word is on the street, so.
Okay.
Yeah. We have every intention of getting you involved.
Right.
Not
Well,
you
it doesn't
personally
have to be
necessarily.
Me, not me personally.
No, teachers.
But I'm going to give you those names right now.
Wonderful.
You'll be happy.
So just so I understand what you're suggesting, so teachers should have the expectation that everything in their classroom when they go in to teach will work and that they know how to use everything that's there, and they should have been trained on it before they even decided to use it in the classroom in front of their kids.
Well, now, I got a Promethean board. I should have been able to get training before the kids came.
Right.
But they were putting the board up after the kids came. So the kids are sitting there watching them put the board on the wall. So there's no time before the board gets there that I get trained.
So this
which
was the
seems to be a
recent
little
purchase from this money.
When Mrs. Burdick left, she had money.
then.
And,
Okay.
Right. So my first opportunity to get any kind of focused training was this summer, which I took full advantage of.
This summer.
Because during the school year, I'm supposed to be in my room.
Right.
So I took my time this summer to go
Right.
and get training from these two names on this paper, which I'm going to give
So
to
the
you.
expectation that, your iPad's going to sync up immediately to the Promethean board should work.
Right.
Or to your computer.
Right.
Should work.
Right.
Yeah.
If the training's being offered, things should be syncing right away.
That's not my experience with technology. It's not
Well,
quite as smooth as that.
But I think
But I
sometimes when
understand.
people talk about it, you talk about it like, let me put these people
Like
to
it's going to
Harvard.
solve all your problems.
Like it's going to work and solve all your
Right,
problems,
exactly.
when in fact, it isn't, and it doesn't quite go as smoothly as like you'd like it to go.
And that's why one of the things, Rebecca, one of the things that we've talked about in the technology committee is to actually have focus groups with teachers, because to
Right.
get a better handle on what do teachers want, what are they
Right.
using, and what do they need.
I think that'd be
And
great.
that's part of our plan.
That would be
So,
really great.
Yeah. Okay. Did you, Rebecca? No. Okay.
I just
Carol.
had a follow-up question from that. Do teachers have someone that they can call when their laptop doesn't sync up with, when there is a technical glitch, which we all know will happen? Is there a person or a person at each different building who comes into your room and is really good with technology and fixes it for you? Because training is one thing, but
Right.
there's always going to be glitches.
Well, there's two answers to that.
And, we used to have the person that would come into
Yours and
school
mine.
and fix the overhead projector when you couldn't get the overhead projector to work. Do we have like that technology? And it's even more complicated now. Because I can't even
Right.
fathom how difficult it must be to be dealing with all the things you're dealing with as a teacher, and then on top of it, have nobody helping you to fix these issues. I mean, if you were in a company, if you were working in a corporation, there would be somebody that would trot down to your office and fix it for you. And I just wonder if we have anyone, if we could create a position of some sort, or somehow deal with this question, because I think it's really important. We're spending money on technology. We have limited dollars, and if we're not maximizing every one of those dollars, then we've got a problem.
So, to answer your question, Tom Lotz is our network administrator, and there are a number of technicians that we've used the traditional model, i.e. a support, you email, we send them out to the field. But as part of our K-5 integration model, we talked about a technology integrator, and an LMC specialist, and we wanted to bring the technicians out to the sites where because it's all relational. Right? When Linda's got a problem, she needs to know who she can go to and get that solved and get help. And if you put a ticket in, you may or may not. You're in a queue, and you may or may not get that answered quickly. So this year, at each of the elementary schools, we have technicians who are spending 3.5 days at the building, and the principals and the teachers know what those days are and when they're there. Because you're right, you work very hard to prepare a lesson. You're ready to go. The students are there, and it doesn't work.
Right.
And there's nothing more frustrated. And I think the message that gets delivered is, well, I'm not going to do this again. It's a significant time and investment, I had to go to Plan B. So we're working on that as a district. I think we recognize there are issues there, and hopefully by getting technicians in the elementary school, they can do those things, Carol, you were talking about, and answer teacher dilemmas as we move along. So, Tom, I don't know if you wanted to say anything.
No, we'll leave it at that.
Okay. I killed it.
Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting how far technology has gone within the past 3 years. I am totally enthusiastic about how things have changed. But we also have to think about, and after hearing what other board members have said, we have to think about within the school, most of the teachers have notebooks or computer laptops. We have iPods. We also have students with cell phones, and those are being used all throughout the day. And we have to think about, with all of that high-tech software being used all at once, there are going to be a whole lot of problems that are obviously unforeseen. So we want to think about that. We also want to make sure that we don't need any weak links, and The one thing that we also want to make sure is that the teachers are properly trained to use some of the new items that are coming in within the school system. Before something happens, make sure that they're properly trained in case they need some troubleshooting on the spot. And I also agree that if a notebook is crashing, and that's a big no-no. If a notebook is crashing once or twice a day, or even once every other day, that's something that we have to look at immediately. That shouldn't be happening at all. That's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Tom, for that report.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to policy. Policy, anything? No?
We don't have anything coming
Okay. You
have the
today.
minutes.
We have, the minutes are in the
Okay.
packet.
Any questions? Yes.
Just a couple of questions. One under your item 2, which is the bullying. I understand this is in great flux throughout the nation, not just in the state. I really think I'd like to see the board have involvement prior to going to the bullying one, where the discussion of what I guess the catchphrase now is cyberbullying, or we have discussion prior to that, because I think there's a lot of sadness of what has happened out there on a few cases. But I take this no different than what happens at the mall or what happens at a movie, where there may be outside discussion and it may carry back to the school system. Where is our responsibility? And I think it's time that the judicial system and the legal system sort of takes a look at this and says, look, we're responsible for this. If it carries back into the school system, obviously, then it's our responsibility. But I think there's a lot of feeling discussion that needs to go on with this, and then actually get something down. Kind of a reversal where we've had policies come from the policy committee, and then it comes to us and goes back. I think it's just one that's got way too much media attention right at this time, that a prior discussion, nothing formal, to give some help and guidance for it, because I think it's just a big one out there that has got a giant spotlight on it right now. Second one was under background investigation, which is your item number 3 in criminal records. And we've gone to the other side on this too, where we have, I don't know if we're now fingerprinting for field trips or not, but on the other side, I want to make sure that anybody who's doing any coaching has it. And it seems there may be some clarity to this, but I'm not sure where the clarity is on who is and who isn't on it. So when you're working on this, I think it should be just a simple list of anyone having instructional or athletic training towards an individual. There's a state law on this, and then I think districts have sort of scoped it into their own type of thing. And again, we need to be safe, but I think we also need to say that if parents are volunteering to go on a field trip, where is, that line of distinction?
Can I just speak to that?
Thank you.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the line is anybody who's paid, coach, anybody like that, is fingerprinted. The line where you don't have to fingerprint people is what's called anybody who's a designated volunteer. In other words, who has a regular schedule, who comes in regularly, who has interactions with kids on a regular basis, has to be fingerprinted and do the background check.
Those are non-paid, Leslie, you're saying? Too?
Non-paying, yep.
Okay, because that's where I think that clarity gets somewhat fuzzy, is that.
And then anybody who's just a volunteer who comes in, who's a PTA member, who comes in and copies for the teacher or something like that, is not a designated volunteer, so by policy does not have to be fingerprinted. And that's how we've understood it. And that's the designation.
Yeah, and I know this doesn't quite say, I think that's what I'm looking for, is something that
Well,
says.
the policy says very
Right.
specifically, designated volunteer, and defines it.
And I think that word volunteer just gets looked at differently by different groups. Because I know those that, I think under coaching, and that's a good example, there are paid coaches and non-paid coaches, and they come in and out and so forth. I think we see some not getting fingerprinted, yet other ones say, okay, go and get fingerprinted. And I think that gets a little bit on the cloudy side. And again, that's an administrative thing, but it can come back to us if an incident were to happen, which we hope never does, but, why was this individual? Just go to Manchester and ask them about, simply they used substitute janitors, and they had that horrible incident that did happen over there a little over a year ago. And that's, again, if we have paid outside services. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, our student teachers all have to be fingerprinted to come on in correctly.
That's right.
So, in the short periods of time. It's just that one small section that seems to...
Well, I think the model policy, when we finally draft one for your review, I think you'll see that clarity there, Ken.
Okay.
Okay?
I have a question just for you to follow up, because I want to be sure what you're asking us to do in the future. So to have a conversation around bullying and bullying as a policy, are you looking for some legal expertise to help us figure out to what extent is the school board responsible?
I think that's well said. I'd like so that the board can have discussion. I think there has to be, and again, I think this is just one that's got a big spotlight on it.
No, I understand.
If we can have some clarity to come to the board for us to send to the policy committee versus going back and forth, I think this can be done faster in that manner, because then we've had the input at the beginning and we've asked the questions, and then the policy committee can go back and draft
So
it.
a presentation to the
from the legal
board
side,
from.
I think having some upfront conversation. In fact, there's a proviso. The legislature passed new law, right?
Yeah.
About bullying, and we have a model policy from New Hampshire school boards, which is some 10 pages long.
Which,
and
just like the health plan, you get glazed over at paragraph 4.
They changed bullying to can be a single incident now, not a pattern of behavior. They have, because of cyberbullying, sexting, whatever the term may be, that it can also, it used to be it took place within the schoolhouse doors. It was quite clear where it took place.
Absolutely.
Now it's if it somehow arrives and has a substantial disruption to the school day, even though it took place off campus. That's the rub. And we've heard from lawyers about First Amendment protections. And it's like, if you may remember the old Tinker versus Des Moines case about the armbands, et cetera. When you substantially disrupt school, well, then it's a bullying incident. So it's complex, and the demands on principals to go through a very scripted procedure. Within 48 hours, do X. Within 2 days, do Y. And then within 10 days, do Z. They are some onerous demands on principals. And so we're working through that policy, and I think there'll be plenty of opportunity for the board to have a conversation about, and I'm looking at Ann because I know we went to that conference over in Concord a while back, to weigh in on this, I think.
So to answer Mitch, I do think the board needs to talk prior to policy getting.
Okay.
Absolutely, that's fine.
Okay. Ann?
Well, just to add to what Ed said, the amended statute really doesn't leave a lot of latitude for policy development. There are 14 specific things that need to be in that policy, and you have to have all 14, including the definitions above and beyond, which talk about bullying, cyberbullying on school, and so forth. School, what constitutes school property, and that kind of thing. So. The problem for us is always going to be enforcement and implementation and the huge wave of
Put all the laws
paper.
out there you want.
And part of what I think what we're going to have to address is really having that dialogue with our parents, whether it's pre-K or senior year. What goes on inside and outside the school, and the kind of behavior that is expected of our students, and what crossing the line means, and crossing that line into that bullying arena is going to have consequences.
Rebecca, and then Dexter.
Sort of along the enforcement piece of it is I wonder how involved we're getting our staff with this. Like, is there a policy if they see something, what do they do? Because I know that one of the unfortunate bullying cases, allegedly teachers saw it and didn't do anything. So I wonder if there's sort of been any training or anything.
There's an annual training requirement now under the law.
So, and not just teachers, but all building staff.
Teachers, students, parents, volunteers, everyone.
Paraprofessionals, custodians. I mean, I think if they have a clear idea of, if they see something going down, and then it gets reported.
I mean, that's the key. I mean, you teach that in elementary school, right? I mean, tell an adult, don't let a bully, tell someone. I mean, there's a whole series of lessons and curriculum that can happen and follow with all of this. But I think Ann hit the nail on the head. It's very prescriptive. The statute doesn't leave much latitude for having, but I still think it's important that we all understand it and go forward. We have until January 1 to pass the policy, and then by March 31st, I believe, to have the training implemented. And so we've been, as advised by the School Boards Association, kind of taking our time and making sure we do this correctly and not rush right in. So there's a workshop tomorrow, as a matter of fact, in Concord about this again. So it's a hot topic, Ken. You're absolutely right.
Dexter?
So actually, based on, Ed, what you and Ann have reported out, it actually may be more interesting to both us and the community not to spend a lot of time on policy, because in fact the policy is prescribed by the legislation. But what may be more interesting is as you put your plans together to administer that policy and the training programs that you're going to run and the processes you'll put in place to monitor and control. I mean, I think that's worthy of a discussion both for us and for the public, so that the community understands both what's required and the extent that administration is taking this issue seriously and doing all the right things. So I think Kent's right. We can get through the policy really quickly because I think it's been written for us from the sounds of it. Yeah, but what we have to write, what your administration has to write is sort of the management and execution of that policy. And I think that's where we can really have a healthy discussion.
Well, that's a good point. That's a great point. And I think
training.
Thinking about how we can.
I mean, to enlighten the community.
Absolutely.
So that because the community should be asking us and you. So what is Portsmouth School District doing about bullying? And we'll want to very clearly be able to take them through.
And just to follow that, I mean, I agree on what's written, and that's something that we have to monitor. But already there are a number of articles challenging these policies, because it's not New Hampshire, it's Massachusetts actually, if you look at it, of where the school actually is legally binded. So that's why we want to make sure, we're protecting ourselves under the policy, or maybe we're going too far. And again, I know that both Massachusetts, New York, and New Jersey are challenging, where is that fine line of something coming in because of students that aren't in school. There is no consequence, and that was the New Jersey case. If you pull it on up, it'll show that these students weren't in this school. They've been disciplined or suspended from school, yet the other ones weren't. So it's a complicated mess that technology has once again dropped its fine stuff at the doorstep.
Yeah, I think this will be a good conversation. Okay, moving on from policy. You going to say anything?
No, I'm
okay. JBC.
So I'll start with the Portsmouth High School turf field. As a lot of you know, since you were there, we had the opening ceremony last Friday, September 10th. And participating in that ceremony were the captains and other members of the high school fall sports teams, as well as the middle school fall sports teams. And I want to thank Steve Bartlett for actually organizing that, but also pointing out to make certain that that ceremony included middle schoolers, because we all know, in fact, that this field is a result of the new middle school that's being built and partially funded by the state of New Hampshire. So the girls' hockey team, field hockey team, was the first game played on it, followed by the boys' football team. The field is now closed this week to finish the work. They're providing, they're laying down the surface for the D area that's closest to the school, so that it has the track surface on that. Should be finished this week, and then the field should be open permanently for business early next week. So a terrific success story, I think, for the city as well as for the committee. So Grant Street Field, also making great progress there. In fact, we had some delays, but we now have received all of our approvals from the city, from the state, from the New Hampshire Division of Historic Resources, and from the EPA, which also got involved in that process. and don't ask me to explain why, but we needed their approval before we could move forward on the Wentworth School. Abatement is scheduled to begin this week in the school. Demolition is to shortly follow that. It'll be a phased approach, so as they finish abating part of the school, they'll begin to demo that down. Because of the delays with getting the state approvals, we have a very tight schedule. We will get everything completed, and if the weather holds, we conceivably get the sod down as well. But frankly, it'll have to be a really warm, long fall to get the sod down. If the sod doesn't get down, then when the weather cooperates in the early spring, it's laid down then, so you don't lose much. In other words, it's all prepared. You basically rake it out when you come back from the winter, and you can lay the sod down. We've already worked with Russ Wilson, and if that were to happen, some of the early games of the season will be scheduled to other fields, but that field will be up and operating sometime for that season. And you can take that to the bank, because I believe that's true. So Parrott Ave Middle School site. We continue to go through the city approval processes. Last week, the representatives of the committee met with the Trees and Greenery, who approved our plan. Representatives also met with Traffic and Safety, and they approved the plan related to traffic and safety with a couple of minor amendments. They've asked, although we had planned on this, they asked us to specify this, that as buses exit the back of the middle school, that they turn right on Rogers Ave, and then they, at the intersection of Rogers and Parrott, they turn left towards Junction. So taking them away from the most congested areas of that neighborhood. We had planned to present our plan to the Planning Board on September 16th. That's been postponed at our request until October 21st. We're still working on our drainage plans for that site. We're working very closely with the city. I think everyone knows that it's a difficult drainage site. We want to make sure we get it right, and so we want to take the extra time to make certain that the plans that we're putting together tie in with the city water and sewer systems, so that we make sure that firstly we don't add to the problem, but infect it, but that we also adequately address the existing problem, which anybody who works at the middle school knows that parking lot can get flooded. And we need to make certain we take care of that. So that's a bit of a disappointment. I can't tell you right now what impact that delay is going to have on schedule. Parking has been in the news. Our transportation consultant, VHB, submitted a revised report. They had the wrong number of current staff in that report. They selected just teachers and forgot about all of the other support staff. And so rather than 66 people, we actually have 92 staff. It doesn't change the parking requirements, because in fact that's the number of people that are in that area now parking. The committee last week selected our interior color scheme, and so I'll try and describe the colors. Although it's not fair, and at some point the community will see this, because we will, as we've done, we will have another presentation. But what I would say is that the major fields, the carpets in the media center and in the class break, the grade breakout areas, as well as the tiles in the corridors and the stairwells, I would say they're a beige taupe, is what I describe it. It's a warm color. And then we have 4. Steve, why are you laughing at me? And then we have 4 accent colors, and the accent colors are maroon, and what I would say are muted. They're not primary, but they're muted blue, orange, and green. And the idea is that those accent colors, like in most schools, will be used in fabrics. They'll be used in tiles in discrete ways to symbolize a particular grade in a wing. So, for example, you might have the grade 6 wing have certain accent colors that are green, for example, and 7th might be blue. And maroon conceivably could be accents throughout the school. I mean, those decisions haven't been set yet, but that will give you a sense of how the accents are being used.
She objects to orange. I told her it's more of a peach color.
Yeah, it's not. I know. It isn't an It isn't an orange.
No.
It's not. But I'm not good with colors, Linda, and so I couldn't. It's one of those things you need to see it. It really works well together.
Leslie said peach. I was okay with that.
We will, but we're not going to present them.
Yeah.
You will see them when they're presented to the community. But the point is that the committee went through sort of narrowing it down from 12 to 3 to last week 1. And there was almost consensus at the committee.
Almost. One thing I would add.
I picked a different one, just so that you know.
Dexter, I would add that we try in the picking of the colors, we tried to pick things that would be long-lasting, that weren't, things that would go out of style, that were
trendy colors.
You'll see that. I mean, you can have a trendy green and a non-trendy green.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so on with each color in the color family. And what you'll see is that, in fact, these aren't trendy colors.
Right.
And we worked very closely with JCJ, and we pushed them on that to be certain that, in 10 years, people don't say, oh, that's so 2010.
What were they thinking?
And they feel pretty confident that it's a color palette that will wear well and have some brightness to it, but will still wear well. And the last thing I'll say about colors, and then we'll move on, is that as they thought about colors in a school, they think about elementary schools, which can be very light and vibrant, and this senior school, high school, that may be more sophisticated, and the palette in the middle school is sort of somewhere in between. And as you have that kids in that age group, and so what I'd say is that we think that this color palette is sort of captures that. But I know that just like art, some people will love it and some people won't. So you can ask a question in a minute. Okay. We're also working with ArtSpeak, and Leslie is on point on that, but as you know, there's a city ordinance for art in public buildings, and it's early in the process, but we want to make certain that that is integrated into our overall plan. And I think there's some great energy and excitement about that.
There's some really very interesting ideas, and we're really just at the idea stage and talking about possibilities, but there's some really exciting ideas, including one of the things that we've talked about is, I don't know if you remember the water fountains in the middle school that don't work anymore, but they're actually set into the walls with some mosaic tiles around there, and so we're looking at possibly an art project or something to install in some of the water fountains, similar mosaics or something along those lines.
And the last thing I'll report on, then we'll take questions, is the financials. So I mentioned that the turf field was completed on time under budget. The guaranteed maximum price for that field came in at $1.1 million. We had a budget of $1.6 million, so that was actually great news. But we don't have a GMP2 yet for the Granite Street field because of the delays associated with that. We approved certain expenditures for abatement and demo so that we can get that going. Abatement is going to cost us considerably more than originally thought, just because the amount of materials that need to be abated once they really got in there and looked at it. At our September 22nd meeting, we will be approving GMP number 2. And that's my report.
Now questions?
Let it rip.
I have 2. One, the tiles. Are the students going to be involved at all in making those?
No, the art ordinance is very clear that it can't be. It can't be student art.
Okay.
However, can I just speak to that for a minute?
Yeah.
One of the stipulations that we are considering putting into the RFP when we do send that out for artists is that the students have to be involved in some way. In other words, the artist has to invite them into the studio, has to include them in some way. They have to be a part of something.
Okay, I didn't realize that those mosaics were the 1% for art.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And then the other thing about the colors is, was there any discussion or thought about like the emotional effects on colors? You know, like red is very energetic, blue is very calming. And
we didn't spend it. What we asked them is, and they again, JCJ does schools. This is their core businesses. And we didn't ask them describe how students respond to various colors. What we asked them are, we want to see palettes that are consistent with what are used in schools and specifically what are used in middle schools. So we went through that. What we didn't say is tell us how people respond in different ways to blues, or cooler colors versus hotter colors.
And in truth, much of it is very neutral.
Yeah.
The color comes more from an accent.
Yeah,
so.
what you'll see and what we need to make certain of, and again, we're not there yet, and we'll all get a chance to see it as a community, is how the accent colors are used. And that's really going to determine, in my mind, the wearability of this, if you will.
And I'm glad you're not going with trendy colors, because
And they're not.
But and then you said taupe for the rugs, and taupe is a beige, is an off-white for a floor surface.
No, it's a taupe is a what I would
Or is
say
it
is a
gonna hide the
grayish.
dirt?
No, it's a brownish gray, and I would say it's a mid-tone, and it's
not white.
It's very
and it's patterned.
It's
It's
very
patterned. That's what I was looking for. It's patterned, and it also has some other color flecks in it.
Okay.
So
And they fit
two
together.
things. One
They're in
is
squares.
it'll hide the dirt, and secondly, it's tile.
Yes.
And so they come in
Carpet tile.
3 by 3 square tiles, I
Yep.
think, 3
Yep.
foot by 3 foot.
Which
And
are
so-
easily replaced.
And so the reality is and we're assured that they have high wearability, but the reality is that if you need to replace a tile, you replace a tile and not the whole carpet. This isn't broadloom like you have in your bedroom.
Right.
And I mean, we've
Have you talked about the off-gassing of those, of the carpeting? Because I know that.
so this is being done by this is conforming to CHIPS,
Okay.
which is the state school leads,
Right.
and all that stuff is part of
Okay.
CHIPS.
Okay.
And the only other thing is about colors while we're there. And so in the common space, the other piece of the common space is that that space will be, hold your breath, it'll be vinyl wood flooring. And we've seen small mock-ups of this. We have not seen large mock-ups. Some of the construction people that are on the committee have seen it, and we will go and look at it. And they've told us, our people on our committee have told us two things. It's incredibly tough. And so, again, the comments will be where we'll have the tables and the chairs, and it's tougher than the vinyl, the tiles that are used in the corridors. And they've told us it looks like wood once it's down. I'm a bit of a skeptic, but we're actually going to go and look at installations that are big and that we can look at it. And the reason that's important is that is probably the major space that the public will see is in the common area, and really not in the other parts of the room.
I have one quick question. Kent, you go first.
Yeah, I got a couple. One is that there's been a high question in regards to why in the turf field the end zone where the shot put wasn't done. I'm going to follow that up with that I've heard through a number of people that there was a concern that coaches were not involved in any manner or discussion of the turf field, and they do, I think, have a concern of being left out on that. But again, I've heard different reasonings of why that end zone wasn't completed, and it sorts to end there. And then I have two other
All right,
questions.
so that one was never part of the specs. So when this committee approved the initial phase with JCJ, it was the field that was priced out, not the D rings, and so it was never part of the scope. Now, when the JBC took over, initially we tried to put it in the scope, and we didn't have the money.
Okay, because one of the reasons I had heard is that, you clarify it, and anybody, is that we didn't meet the wetland zone because that comes within the 100 or whatever the buffer is, and I've heard that. I don't know if that's true or not.
No, it's not true.
Okay.
It was not in scope. We tried to get it in scope because aesthetically it would have been nicer. But the reality is you don't need it for any of the sports that are being used on that facility. So we didn't, it wasn't included originally.
And I think that's where
It
some
included.
coaching may have come in. I think if you talk to a number of coaches, they may disagree with that. They would say that there would be a use for
It
it.
was out of
Such
scope.
as
It was out of
they're
scope.
some are very pleased that we now have an official high jump area on the school end there, which that works out very
Mhm.
well. Secondarily, I didn't hear anything in tonight's report and would like to hear back in regards to what are considered the archaeology.
Oh, yeah, I can,
dig
yeah, I'll-
spots that need to be done.
Yeah, so-
And whether in any of this we have any backup plans, such as, if, I think of just up the street there, they found the African-American cemetery, which was, labeled as slave cemetery or
Right.
whatever, what could and might happen, because as that is considered a filled area, there will be a number of things as they dig and prod, I'm sure, because I'm sure all we did was tar over from the.
Yeah, so what I can report out what JCJ reported out at our meeting last week, and Steve or Leslie, help me if I get it wrong, but fundamentally the requirement is that you dig your test pits until you no longer find any artifacts, and they've gone down in these test pits that are fairly narrow, and they've gone down as far as they safely can go down, and they're still finding artifacts. And so what they need is they need to go back to get state approval. That's correct. To expand the test pits. So that yes, the size of it, because right now they're dangerous, you just can't go any deeper. To expand the size of those test pits so they can continue to go down, and again, until they meet the requirement of no longer finding artifacts. Now, the artifacts they have found to date are just normal dump-related artifacts that you would see in a city urban fill, which is what that was. And so, so far, there's nothing that raises any flags. But of course, you're right. Until you have finished it, you don't know.
Could be the last day that you're digging, and
You don't know. So we're continuing. And Steve, have we heard back from the state? Has JCJ heard back from the state?
JCJ, I talked to Doug last night at about 6:30. He said that the state was considering allowing us to monitor it as we did the project rather than continue to try to do the interim next choice was they're supposed to dig 16 holes. I think it was 3x3 or 4x4, something like that. When you get down much further than 5 or 6 feet, you get an OSHA problem. So the next thought was, well, we'll have to dig trenches. And then the issue was, in order, before they could even get approval for the trenches, we need the field back. So I think they were about this far away from formal approval to do an on-site monitoring as the project progressed, similar to what they did with the library site. But we don't have that in writing yet.
Okay.
Next question is under drainage. It sounds like you're meeting latter part of October. I'd like to see, that means that there'll be a period of time that we'll meet at least 2 more times, if not 3 more times, 2 more times, because I think you said October 21st.
October 21st,
So
when it
we'll
goes to
meet one
planning
more
board.
time here in September. I'd like to, just see a glimpse of what that is, because that is, and has been after parking, probably my number 2 concern is that the water table, like you were saying, you dig 6 feet there, I'm sure they might have even hit water at a few times at high tide.
Well, what I would encourage you to do is come to the JBC meeting, because what we can't do is report out to this committee on our work in progress. It's the responsibility of the JBC.
No, I'm not
committee.
asking for that.
So
I'm
what we
asking
can do is
an update.
Come to our meetings, and also I would say come to the planning board. And after it's presented to the planning board, we'll definitely update this committee on the results of that effort. But we can't sort of on an interim basis report in an interim way to this group.
Okay, then lastly, and I'm just going to throw this in under colors, and I'm not going to mention much, other than the longest standing rival in the state of New Hampshire is Portsmouth against Dover. Dover's no, and see, Linda's going to agree with this. Do not have green dominate anywhere, or many of the old timers. This is a true.
Two things. It's not a Dover green.
Yeah.
All right.
That's true.
It's not a
I'll give
Dover
you about 5 people that say any green in a building would be, but
and-
it's one that green. Because Linda will remember, you don't have to go back that far, Linda. The green is a
I'm right with you, Ken.
taboo type color. Blue is over in Exeter, and you could have anything blue, I think, and not have a problem. But if you put green on,
It's not going to be good.
yeah,
More maroon than anything
yeah, that's
else.
right, UNH color.
We'll take that under advisement as we begin to design the details.
I can see a few people down with signs.
Really?
Carol.
That might be one.
Just a question for clarification, nothing to do with the colors.
Yeah, thank you.
Although
that was a
I've never
mistake.
seen you uncomfortable with any topic, Dexter.
Except for colors?
Except for colors. The letter that was in our packet, which says that there were 66 employees for
Right.
99 parking spaces, is incorrect?
That's incorrect.
It's 92?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And to be fair to Tom Morgan, who wrote that letter, and also has wrote several other letters to the JBC, and during public comment has talked to the JBC about parking. He picked that number up from one of the consultant's reports. And as I mentioned, that report was wrong. It's since been corrected, but that parking, it doesn't change the parking study or the parking requirements for that facility. It's still 96, if I'm correct. 92 staff and four handicap.
And that does not include visitor
And
parking.
that doesn't include visitor parking. So that's strictly just to meet the
That's just-
staff requirements.
That's what the state requires.
And then you have to factor in visitors and all the rest of that stuff. So it doesn't, I mean, that, frankly, we're upset that the consultant got it wrong. There's plenty of blame to go around, and it doesn't matter, but it's been fixed now, and it doesn't change the answer that was presented to the parking commission, and where they made the decision on parking.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
So the last committee report is the Blue Ribbon Committee on Operational Efficiencies. Who's reporting on that? Anyone?
Me? I was absent.
You.
I was absent. Well, we did meet at the end of August, and we heard essentially from Attorney Flygar, who I think spoke to some of the impediments in a collective bargaining agreement to just simply outsource. By statute, as I understand it, it has to be noted in the collective bargaining agreement, or you're prohibited. Also talked a little bit about impact bargaining and the concerns around that. And so I think Attorney Flagger did a wonderful job and kind of brought folks up to speed with that. And then there was conversation about our next meeting, which will be on September 30th. And the conversation there will be about the wisdom and opportunities and challenges with moving central office out of Little Harbor to City Hall, that's the next topic, I guess, for the group to look at. I don't know if I've left anything out.
No?
Good job.
Okay. So that's the final thing on our agenda.
Sure. Before we adjourn, I do want to ask the superintendent, I talked to him beforehand, I've had a number of discussion with people, and it kind of goes with fundraising and so forth. Recently, there was a parking allowed at the high school, and I'm just asking, I talked to Ed Pryor, and I just want to make it public so we get a fallback up, that the LPGA used and had a fee to go parking at the high school and then bust on over. And to my surprise, the superintendent really didn't know much about it, and he's going to follow up on it. But we do have, a rental, and we've had this discussion in regards to parking. It's come up, and we've turned down other organizations in the past to have similar type of setups. So again, it seems to be one that kind of went under the radar. So I'm just asking that the superintendent follow up and get back, so that because I think it raised a lot of money. Some of this went towards nonprofits and so forth. But again, it seems to be one that has been questioned because it was a 3-day event, maybe a 4-day event. I just know of 3 days.
I'll get the data and report back, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.